Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is a very special bonus episode for us.
It is. Bonus Thursday drop, which is a crazy thing to be doing 2 weeks into this new series.
Look,
but
actually, I think it's exciting. It's nice to have a double episode for people who haven't had enough of us yet.
I know, and it might look a little different as well because we're here with Prime Video, which we're so excited about because we're going to spend this episode talking about shows that pretty much live rent-free in our head.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that we're working with. We often talk about these behind-the-scenes things we're consuming, but also the shows that stimulate our minds live rent-free, but also things that I'm very hyper-fixating on.
Oh, yeah. This is why we're like, this works for small talk, because we're going to take something and completely overanalyze
yeah, break it down.
But also, this is going to live in a few different feeds. So we should also say, if you're listening to this from another platform, we're from Big Small Talk, which is a podcast that breaks down pop culture and news stories. And then this is our new series, Small Talk, which takes things from online or from conversations and deep dives it.
So those are both weekly podcasts, and we have another big talk, again, completing our trio, which is looking at a headline of the past through a fresh lens, and that's twice a month. So it's a 10 episodes, basically podcast a month with 3 different streams.
Yeah. But today, I mean, this is the best thing ever because we get to talk about both of our favorite TV shows. And it's actually crazy because at the end of last year, we got a message in asking what our favorite TV show was, and both of us at the same time said Fleabag.
Yes.
Which, if you haven't watched Fleabag, you should, so that you really understand everything we're going to say today.
The genius of Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
She is a genius. So this actually, Fleabag came out 2016.
Yes.
Right? And then they had a second season that came out a few years after that?
Yeah, it was a couple of years later, and it was actually originally a play. I have seen the filmed version of the play in a movie theatre too.
I thought you were going to say you saw the actual live performance, and I was going to be like, that's my dream.
No, but Phoebe Waller-Bridge, it's so interesting to be able to write and create a TV show that is, 12 episodes and probably one of the biggest moments of the zeitgeist for young women.
Yeah. Also, the premise of it is it's about Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, who they don't actually say her name in the whole thing.
It is just Fleabag.
Yeah, yeah. And they look at what it's like her relationship with her friends, but it's relationship with her family, and it's all comedy. It's hilarious. And she breaks the fourth wall the whole time as well. But when we were looking at it, we both had a similar takeaway theme, which was looking at family dynamics in that. Because really there's a few key characters. And Claire, her sister, is probably the other main character in it, I would say.
Yeah.
And then there's her friendship with Boo, which we'll come back to. But and then there's her dad and her stepmom and stuff. But what was your reaction to that?
I mean, I think it's interesting. We're both eldest daughters in our family, which, everyone should have guessed about us by now if you didn't already know. But I think that the siblinghood dynamic of Fleabag is one of the core themes of the show because Claire's relationship with Fleabag is the younger sister, Claire is the older sister. Now, Claire, if you haven't seen the show, really represents that sort of type A, uptight stereotype, right? Yeah. She is very successful. She is very cold. She is very organized and almost controlling. And she's always worried for Fleabag. And I think that, interestingly, I'm not sure if this resonates with you, but I don't feel like, even though I'm definitely a type A, that I find myself in Claire. I find parts of myself in Claire, but everyone wants to be Fleabag, even though she's floundering, even though she's clumsy, even though she's effing up in so many different aspects of her life.
But that is the sibling dynamic. You have the eldest who has to be the responsible one, but everyone loves the youngest who's able to fuck around a bit.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about Claire and Fleabag too is it kind of plays into this birth order theory, but also Claire's worry about Fleabag is such a part of her personality. I see it in myself with my own younger sister in that so much of our relationship is made up by my ability to worry about her and stress over her and kind of create and reinforce that dynamic, even though it's so unnecessary, because most of the time through the show, Fleabag's actually teaching Claire more than Claire's teaching Fleabag.
It's always the way.
Yeah, it is.
I honestly thought the biggest love story, the love story in Fleabag, even with season 2, and if you've seen season 2, you know that's where the hot priest is.
Yeah.
The love story in it is Claire.
Oh my gosh,
Fleabag.
It's one of the best lines of the whole series is the only person I'd run through an airport for is you.
Yeah.
I love that you bring that up because that's exactly what I think too. The purpose and the reason that is the ultimate love story of the show, I think, is because Hot Priest and Fleabag is at the very start of like a honeymoon phase. It's lustful, it's tense, it's all of these things. But the beautiful part about the sister dynamic, I think, that's underestimated in Fleabag is they understand deeply each other's flaws and the spiky parts of the personality and all of the issues of their like incredibly complex family dynamic.
Well, that's the thing. There's something with siblings is, you know, they're the only ones that will go through everything with you.
Yeah.
Like, I find that with my brothers as well. It's like they are the only people that I truly think understand, and I understand them in a way that really no one else can compare to, because you had the same upbringing, even though you have different experiences depending where you are in the sibling birth order theory. But at the end of the day, when you see like that sister dynamic that they have in the show, it's so much of what they bond over is this like mutual eye roll at the stepmother, or talking about their own mum, or talking about their upbringing, even if they kind of hate each other when they're doing it.
Yeah, it's just there's so many unsaid and unspoken things that are accepted and sort of understood between one another.
So sad. I remember there was that line where Claire was like, what did she say? She was like, I'm not your friend, I'm your sister.
Yes. And the other thing that what you've just said is so sharp, and the thing it takes me to is there's a moment in the show where Claire is talking about Fleabag and she basically says, you will always be funny and you will always be exciting. And she's really referring to the fact that although Fleabag sees her older sister as like the successful corporate, rich, sort of like emotionless but married with a stepchild, kind of meeting all the metrics, the milestones that are set for women, she turns to her sister and she's like, you always get to be exciting and charismatic, and I resent that in you. Like, you're so kind of free even though you fail in all the ways you imagine. Like,
oh my God.
There's so much to it.
Do you know what that makes me think of? Because the first time I watched this, I watched it with my mum, which was a crazy thing because the first scene is like so abrasive.
I tried to show my mum too. It did not work very well. It was hilarious.
I know. And that scene actually came up, and my mum retold me something my grandma actually said to her, because my mum was the eldest of 7, and you know there's a lot of different personalities that in the mix. And one of the most profound things my grandma ever said was, children will do what's left to them. And it's the idea that, you know, my mum was like a type A eldest daughter, and then her youngest sister, the next one that came, was like able to be the rebellious funny one, and it's because, well, that role was left open to her. And then she tested that out among 7 of them, but so many of them are different personalities, and it's because that, I mean, I don't know how much that's true, but it's an interesting concept.
No, I really like that, the idea that, and I think that's often why the middle child gets labeled as like a mediator. The youngest child is often the rebellious one, and the oldest like sets the rules. And we'll get into this more outside of this, but I think that that really hits in that I don't think it's like what's left to them. I feel like that's almost mean to the next child.
I know, but very simplified
But
version.
what it feels like, no, but I think that the more beautiful way to consider that is like you find yourself in relation to your siblings and you find like a dynamic that really works and kind of means all the qualities meld together.
And it's nice because it's like, yeah, Fleabag can be funny and can do all of this stuff because Claire's given her grace to do it.
Yeah. It's really like haunting, actually. It's an
I
idea,
know,
right?
it's actually quite sad when you think about it.
Like when I reflect on the sibling dynamic there and the fact that they present two sides of the coin, it feels less like it's about different kinds of women and more like it's like the two wolves inside me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I think, oh, my sister is this and I am this. I think like there's part of Claire in me and there's part of Fleabag in me. I think that's kind of representative for all of us in a different way.
Yeah, I really like that. I also love that the other big takeaway I had in Fleabag was the idea that she's this completely lovable kind of feminist figure who we walk away being like, you know what, that's a really complex character. But she's also kind of hateable the whole time. She's like the most imperfect role model ever. She's the worst role model, best role model?
It's one of the most likable, unlikable female characters of all time.
Yes.
That it is so rare to see on screen at a successful global level a woman who is just deeply flawed, and that's why you love her. Like, think of another example of that.
No, and not in a way that, and I don't know whether it's her humor that gives her so much grace, because she is funny as well. Like, the whole thing is so funny. But one of the big things was she's so hypersexual.
Yep.
And and in a way that's not, it's really, it gets in a lot of trouble throughout the series, but it's not in a gross way either.
I think at times you're kind of like, oh, I would make a different choice. Like that's really the extent
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
But I often, when I'm watching, I'm like, would I be friends with her through this? Like how would I respond? Or because Boo is such an incredible element of the show where she's an omnipresence, because I won't get, obviously we spoiled a lot of it, but Boo has died and you find that on early in the first season.
And she does something awful to Boo, which
Yeah.
she kind of hates herself. There's so much self-hatred that Flea has for herself as well.
I love the nickname of Flea. That's hilarious.
Did I just say Flea?
Yeah, but you're absolutely right.
I feel close with her.
Yeah, and I think
what's crazy is like it's so funny now that we're talking about it that I feel the need to find a name for her, whereas I've never thought about it like that. But I want to actually...
My Roman Empire.
I do want to talk about the naming in this thing because it's so interesting that the whole series... She's never given a name. Like it's just Fleabag in the title, but also so many characters aren't. And it's interesting to look at which ones are.
Yes.
Like Boo has a name because that's someone who Flea cares about, and Claire has a name because that's someone that Fleabag cares about. Flea, I keep doing it. And then Claire's family has names, but it's more like an extension of her, which is why.
Yeah.
But like Hot Priest is only ever Hot Priest.
Yep.
Her dad... only ever her dad. Stepmom is just her stepmom. There's no naming to them.
Why is that? Do you know? Do you have a theory?
There's theories, but I think it's because the names are given to those she cares for the most.
But why does Hot Priest, I guess he is kind of just fleeting.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel fair to me because he is one of the only people who's able to like break the fourth wall with her. So that feels so vital.
That's true. But you know what? We were talking before about her being a kind of an unlikable character. But she recognizes it in herself, because I thought the fact that, I mean, what happened to Boo, and we won't give it away, but it is a consequence of the hypersexuality. And I think her going after Hot Priest, hot take here, was kind of like the ultimate punishment for herself for that. Like, how do I find the most unavailable man ever than a priest?
But then I think that her hypersexuality presents in those ways, in that she is always lustful for something difficult. Because when you kind of just go out and have random sex with people, and when you just are horny and confused and like a young woman who just wants to put herself out there, it's almost too easy. And the ultimate hurdle is trying to achieve something that is unavailable to you. But I think both of those exactly reflect that.
Yeah. Also on that, one of my favorite quotes, there's two favorite quotes I have in it. One where she goes to therapy to talk about all of this.
Iconic
and to talk,
scene.
Such an iconic scene. But she goes into therapy and she sits across, similar to where we are now, and says, that she's currently not having sex, but like really misses it, and that's something she really struggles with, her identity, and then goes, and your little scarf isn't helping to the therapist. And the therapist is like so deadpan back. And then the other time that she's like confronted with that is when the Hot Priest takes her to this, is it like a church thing? I don't really know.
Yeah,
it's like a group session at church.
Yeah.
And it's like, speak what's on your mind, like safe space. And she gets up and goes, I'm worried I wouldn't be such a feminist if I had bigger tits. And it's so brutally honest. And I'm like, interesting concept.
It resonates with one of the first episodes when she attends the feminist lecture with Claire, and the lecturer says, raise your hand if you'd give up 5 years of your life to have the so-called perfect body. And they both throw their hands in the air. But again, I think one of the core themes of Fleabag is the imperfection of feminism, because she is clearly a progressive woman in many ways, but failing and misunderstood and navigating herself and where she finds herself in the world at the same time. And I think that's why we're so drawn to her, because she represents the imperfections in wanting to be better and be this like ideal moral person, but never being able to get close. It's really interesting.
And she just is so honest and not really caring. And I guess this is the feminist aspect to it when you think about it, because she just doesn't really care. Like she does, obviously, and she cares about Boo and she cares about the self-destructive element of it. But for the most part, this is someone who doesn't really care about societal norms. She will be really promiscuous. She will punch a guy in the face. She will talk. And I think the way she talks to the camera and like is almost like I'm in a completely different world right now and I'm operating on a completely different level to everyone else and no one sees her do that. And I think that's also this really interesting thing where it's like the fact she thinks she's able to do that and just like break away for a moment from reality and not be noticed and make some funny quips is just such a state of her.
Yeah.
Except Hot Priest. And that's one of the best, that's my Roman Empire scene when he's like, where do you go? And she gets really startled.
Yeah. I think it represents to me when I have dated in the past. Sometimes you go on a date with someone and you know that you're kind of just like seeing through them, like you're not really there. But when you actually connect with someone, they're really wanting to enter that world with you instead of just like at a surface level. And I think we all have experienced that feeling of like, oh, there's you meeting someone instantly and understanding that you're on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
That feeling is quite unique, I think.
Yeah, I agree. But there was also this other TV show that we've both watched that I really want to have time to talk about in this, and that is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
You watched this a little while ago, didn't you?
I watched this well over a year ago, and sort of just like a mindless watch that I stumbled across. But I was recommended it because it was like, oh, it's an easy watch, but at the same time you walk away feeling something.
Yeah.
You know?
I only watched it over Christmas break, so it's quite recent for me.
It's more fresh for you then.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's set, if you haven't seen it, it's set in like 1950s New York. And it's really about this woman who is a housewife. Her husband is struggling to become a comedian.
Her husband sucks.
He sucks. He does blatantly suck.
Yeah.
And she kind of falls into huge success as a stand-up comedian. And there's so many, I know that you have a couple of interesting elements of the show that you want to start off with before I get into the big discussion question. But I know that like there's really strong themes of like female friendship, and also there's the concept of marriage and its role at the time is really massive.
Well, I just think almost at the get-go for this storyline, which I do think is funny and interesting about this, is because it's set in 1950s. And pretty much the crux of it is her husband is a failing comedian and then sleeps with his secretary because he's insecure. And she is so distraught by that news that she goes down to the comedy club and like drunk off her face ends up giving us a performance. And it's like, oh, she's actually really talented.
Yeah.
And from there, she goes through this whole divorce process and leaving her husband, but then also kind of is scouted as a talented comedian, everything her husband couldn't be. And so that is a feminist trope in the way that she's like this iconic single woman and then she chases these business dreams, but the whole time she's pushing against it. Like she fell into it. And she has all these feminist ideals, but she herself is fighting them at the beginning.
But that's a common theme of both of these shows, right?
Yes.
It's so interesting that the framing often for the imperfect feminist is the one that accidentally stumbles upon these values and doesn't know what to do with them.
Well, the first few episodes, she's like, I love being a wife and a mum, and I love my New York apartment, and I will bake so my husband gets a comedy slot, and I love doing that for him.
Yeah, too much brisket talk.
So much brisket
funny.
talk. And then her life gets thrown upside down and she's like forced to have a career and forced to do all this stuff, but she doesn't even necessarily want it. She learns like she does, but I think that's such a fair and relatable thing. And I think especially in the divorce conversation as well, because I mean, it's relevant in the 1950s, obviously, but it's still relevant right now that when you go through a divorce and you're put, or a breakup, whatever it is, and you're then put back into the workforce or put back into whatever it is, it's this huge identity crisis because if your identity is tied in your marriage or being a mom or whatever it is, then it's terrifying. So I think that's why this TV show is like nice.
But I also love it for the reason that when I was watching it, it's a really easy show to watch. But I also was like, my mum and grandma would really love this. Like it's a very cross-generational because it's in a different setting and because it's less overtly feminist, but the messaging is still challenging these norms. I thought like, I know my grandma would really be like, I'd be able to have some interesting feminist discussions about the different waves and what it was like to be kind of a career woman or ambitious at that time.
Yeah.
And what if you just, again, stumbled accidentally into that and fell into feminist values? But the theme that resonated with me the most was, I think, something that is quite a universal experience for single and dating women at the moment, which is this inherent tension between being an ambitious woman and the way that affects the kind of social norms of milestones. So I am very ambitious about the career I want, about the lifestyle I want, about the job and my passions and dreams. But then what does that mean ultimately for my dating life, for my intentions to have children, to have a long-term partner, to buy a property? Where would that be? And I think that what this show does really well is challenge and raise some really kind of sort of destabilizing questions around what it means as a young woman to pursue a passion and a dream and find self-fulfillment, but if that is at the cost of a happy family life, what does that feel like, and what should we choose? And I just think it makes for a fascinating series.
I think so as well. And I think what's particularly funny about Mrs. Maisel as well is it's in the comedy sphere. And we see this today, and we still definitely saw the 1950s. Funny women are a bit of a tough pill to swallow, you guys. It's like this weird, like, I mean, that's probably a gross overstatement, but like,
No.
That's a bit destatement. And the whole thing with her husband is A, you're more successful, but B, that's my dream, and C, everyone thinks you're funnier than me, but that's not, you meant to like zip it, hottie.
Yeah, that's the joke. We make this joke to each other behind the scenes all the time. When one of us goes too long, we go, zip it, hottie. Like, it's really funny. But what I really like about that question as well is I read this study once that when women and men are asked what they seek out when women and men are asked what they seek out in the opposite sex in a partner, humor is one of the top values. Always, of course, obvious. It's like attraction, like physical attraction, then humor. When women are asked, what that means, they're like, oh, if he can, if he's funny, like if I find him funny. And when men are asked, they say, like, if she finds me funny, I consider her humorous.
Yeah, I like a girl that can appreciate a sense of humor. It's very different to like, I want a girl that's a knee slapper.
I want a storyteller at Christmas lunch,
Yeah. No, because it's, I understand that's kind of destabilizing, a bit threatening. Yes. And it is in this TV show. And then she's so successful with it.
Yeah. But I think, again, like we talk about this a lot in our personal lives as two ambitious young women who are both single. When we approach dating, I have found this a lot recently, and we speak about it quite extensively, the fact that I'm often like, I think that men they sort of, a lot of the men I've dated seem really interested in my job, and then suddenly I realize it's actually jealousy. But it's true, right?
It's like, do you want to date me or be me?
And it's that's why watching Mrs. Maisel was really like a fascinating experience, because I don't consider, like, I'm early in my career. I don't know where I want it to go. And all I know is that I'm really enjoying the fact that we have this platform we're so privileged to have to speak, to make jokes, to talk about serious and frivolous subject matter. And yet, like, I really felt reflected in the fact that a lot of the guys I've been in relationships with or dated have wanted that for themselves. And ultimately it was like, oh, well, are you interested in dating someone like me? Or is this more of an interest in what I do, but it will ultimately maybe not go well in my interpersonal relationships because there's a tension there.
But what's also interesting is then how you approach it. And I guess even in the TV show, it's this kind of success is thrust upon her at that. Like, and again, she's pushing back on it because she's unlearning, like, oh, I don't want this to affect my ability for him to maybe take me back.
Yeah.
Or to find somebody else, or to just like have the life that I always like. There's so much unlearning in that.
Of course.
From the girl as well to like tone it down a bit then.
And even though, like, I think a sort of resurgence in the feminist conversation now is, oh, well, you should pick your self-fulfillment, your dreams, your ambition. But I think it's entirely fair to still hope for the ability to have both.
Yeah.
And so when it's positioned as this like impossible dilemma, I also find myself being like, but can I have a happy relationship and a family and also have these things? Like, what is the cost? And I think it navigates that constant tension.
Of course you can. Just would have been harder
in the 1950s New York.
Yeah. And if she can do it. And then what was the most recent thing you've watched?
Okay, rom-com. It's called You're Cordially Invited. Have you seen it?
Okay, so I've seen half of it because I came in on my Saturday night
Yes.
and then was like, I'm going to watch a movie, but I only managed to like, it's like my wind down.
Yeah.
which is great. That's what I want.
I understand. It's Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon. And I'm a huge Will
Well,
Ferrell.
that's why I picked it, because I was like, it's Reese Witherspoon.
Yes, yes. But it's from Reese Witherspoon Studios' Hello Sunshine, which you probably heard of. Incredibly successful feminist production company.
Yeah.
But also,
I'm aware.
I am Will
I am the
Ferrell's.
pop culture side of this.
Yeah,
podcast
sorry.
now.
I'm
Have you
informed.
heard of Will Ferrell?
I don't know, maybe like you're not Step Brothers core in an earlier life. I am. That's my childhood, you know.
How dare you? How dare you?
No, but I love that for us as hyper-focused, hyper-fixated overthinkers, I also do need my housemate wind down film. And this was it.
Well, that's what I was saying. This was like, this is an easy watch,
Yeah.
but these are two actors that I love.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a little giggle.
Yeah. No, I loved it.
wind
And I
down.
think it's basically the idea is that there's two wedding parties
Yeah.
that have double booked at a venue. And it's, again, I'm saying it's a rom-com, not leading
It's a bit
on.
Bride Warsy.
It's exactly Bride Warsy. Except it's like two competing families. So it's a different dynamic slightly, but it's exactly the same. I love that it's a similar concept to that.
But it's also similar to this, like both Mrs. Maisel and Fleabag. You know, like you're like, no, Sarah, these are very different
Bring it in.
watches. But all of these are comedies that we're talking about. And all of them have family dynamic themes, sister themes, like
Unlikable character themes.
unlikable character themes, which are the most interesting watches.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if everyone else has been watching these and has other thoughts, especially if you want to go on a rabbit hole on Fleabag, we will.
Oh, yeah. I'll be rewatching for the 8th time this year. Thank you, Prime Video.
I know. I feel like I'm going to kick myself afterwards because it's like, wait, I forgot to say.
I know. But I'm thinking many people who are listening to this have seen Fleabag and it's their comfort show 3 times a year, just like it is mine.
Exactly. So, yeah, please send us a message on bigsmalltalk_pod and we would love to hear from you. And we would love if you also like us talking about films and TV shows, we can do that again.
Yeah.
My brain is on Prime